human finds alien girl in a silent crater, awakening a signal tied to both their fates. Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, back to our main character. Commander Jason Reed had been stranded on the barren planet of Nephris for what felt like days. The desolate, silent landscape stretched out before him like a cold, lifeless ocean of dust and rock. A cold wind blew across the crater, the only sound to accompany the deep silence of the place. The planet had once been home to a thriving civilization, but now, it was nothing more than a graveyard, its secrets buried beneath the cracked, rocky surface. Jason was an experienced commander, having survived countless missions, but this was different. This was no ordinary planet. There was something about Nephris that unsettled him, something he couldn't shake. He had followed a faint distress signal all the way to this silent crater, hoping for a sign of life, but so far, he had found nothing. His suit's HUD flickered in and out of focus as the data stream continued to display the same empty, desolate landscape. And then, just as he was about to call in for an extraction, he saw it. A faint glimmer in the distance, just beyond the rim of the crater. It was small, almost imperceptible at first, but it was there. A shimmer of light, as though the very earth itself was holding its breath. His heart raced. Could it be a reflection? Or was it something else? Jason's instincts told him to investigate. He moved swiftly, his boots crunching on the dusty ground as he made his way toward the glimmering spot. As he approached, the shape began to take form. A figure lying motionless at the base of a jagged rock formation. A female figure, her body glowing faintly against the dull backdrop of the crater. He stopped in his tracks, his breath catching in his chest. It was an alien. But this one was different. Her skin shimmered with an ethereal, translucent glow, like the surface of a gemstone, and her hair seemed to float weightlessly around her face, as though gravity itself had no power over it. She was beautiful in a way that was both otherworldly and captivating. But something more than her appearance caught Jason's attention. The alien girl's breathing was shallow, weak. She appeared to be unconscious, her body battered from what looked like a violent crash landing. Jason approached cautiously, his heart pounding in his chest. He kneeled beside her, careful not to disturb her fragile form. Her eyes fluttered open, revealing striking silver pupils that locked onto his with an intensity that sent a chill down his spine. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then, slowly, the alien girl spoke, her voice a melodic, almost hypnotic sound. "You are human." Jason nodded, trying to hide the rush of adrenaline coursing through his veins. "I am. And you're alive." The girl's lips curled into the faintest of smiles, though it quickly faded. "I was not meant to be found." Jason frowned, looking around the crater. "What happened here? Who did this to you?" The girl's gaze shifted, her expression clouded with a mix of fear and sorrow. The signal, it was not a distress call. It was a trap. Jason's mind raced as he processed her words. A trap? But for whom? And why had it brought him here? Before he could ask any more questions, the ground beneath them trembled, a deep rumble echoing through the rocks. The alien girl tensed, her eyes wide with fear. "They are coming. The signal has awakened them." Jason stood up, his instincts kicking in as he prepared for whatever was about to unfold. The girl's warning echoed in his mind, but he had no time to ponder its meaning. He had to protect her. The fates of both their worlds were now entwined, and it was up to Jason to keep them both alive long enough to uncover the truth behind the signal. As the distant sound of engines roared to life, Jason drew his weapon and moved to shield the alien girl from the dangers that were approaching. Their fates were no longer their own. They were bound together by the signal. And Jason Reed was about to find out just how far that connection would take him. Jason kept his weapon. At the ready, his eyes scanning the horizon as the alien girl, Liara, remained silent beside him. The tremors from the ground had subsided, but the air was thick with the weight of something approaching. The distant roar of engines, growing louder by the second, sent a shiver through Jason's spine. He didn't know what was coming, but his instincts told him it wasn't good. He glanced down at Liara, who was still staring at the crater's edge, her silver eyes wide, as if seeing something he couldn't. "What are they?" Jason asked, his voice low but steady. Liara finally turned to face him, her expression grim. "The signal, it wasn't meant for you. It was a trap for me." Jason's brow furrowed. "A trap? Who would set a trap for you?" Liara hesitated, her gaze shifting toward the approaching noise. "My people, or what's left of them. They're not coming to help. They're coming to finish what they started." Jason clenched his jaw, trying to piece together the fragmented information. He'd followed a distress signal to this remote planet, hoping for a simple rescue mission, but now everything had taken a sharp turn. Liara's presence here, her cryptic warning, the ominous rumble of whatever was coming, they were all connected, and he was caught right in the middle of it. The engines grew louder, closer now. Jason took a step forward, scanning the terrain for any signs of movement. Liara stepped beside him, her body tense, ready for whatever lay ahead. "We need to move," she said quietly. Jason didn't argue. He knew time was running out. He gestured for her to follow him, his mind racing. They couldn't stay in the open, whatever was coming, they needed to find shelter first. He led her toward the remnants of what seemed to be an old outpost at the base of the crater, its structure barely standing against the test of time. As they approached, Jason's communicator beeped softly. He checked the readout, no signal, no communication, just the static of dead air. Not surprising, given the planet's desolate state. They made their way inside, crouching low, keeping to the shadows. Jason's heart raced, the adrenaline starting to pump. This was no longer about a simple rescue. This was about survival. They found a small room in the back of the outpost, and Jason quickly set up a perimeter, scanning for any signs of movement. Liara remained silent, her eyes fixed on the entrance, her expression unreadable. "What are they?" Jason asked again, though he already knew the answer. Liara finally spoke, her voice a whisper. "They were once my people. My species. But they've changed. They hunt us now. And they're coming for me." Jason's mind raced as he processed her words. Her species? A once thriving civilization, now turned into something else? Something dangerous? "We'll figure this out," Jason said, trying to sound more confident than he felt. "We're not alone in this." Liara glanced at him, a fleeting look of gratitude in her eyes. "You shouldn't be here, human. You don't know what you're dealing with." Jason shook his head. "I'm here now. And I'm not leaving without you." For a moment, neither of them spoke, the only sound the wind howling outside. But the rumble in the distance grew louder again, and Jason's grip on his weapon tightened. This wasn't just a rescue anymore. They were in a race against time. And Jason Reed wasn't about to let anyone, or anything, take away the person he'd sworn to protect. The wind outside howled like a distant beast, rattling the crumbling structure of the outpost. Inside, Jason sat on a cold, metallic crate, his back against the wall, eyes flicking between the entrance and Liara. She was standing near the window, her silver eyes scanning the horizon, her body poised with an alertness he had come to respect. Jason's mind raced with questions, but he didn't ask them. Not yet. Time was running out, and whatever was coming, it wasn't waiting. "How long do we have?" Jason finally asked, his voice low. Liara didn't look at him, her gaze still fixed on the landscape outside. "Not long," she replied, her tone calm, almost detached. "They're closer than you think." Jason clenched his jaw, his thoughts swirling. The rumbling from earlier had stopped, but the tension in the air was palpable. The silence was worse than the noise. It was the calm before a storm. He adjusted his grip on his weapon, checking its charge one more time. The old outpost was small, with only a few rooms left intact. It wasn't much, but it was better than nothing. Jason had been through worse. He could feel Liara's presence behind him, a quiet weight in the room. "Tell me more about them," Jason said, not taking his eyes off the doorway. He could sense that she was holding something back, something important. "They're not just my people," she said, her voice soft, like she was speaking to herself. "They were once a proud civilization, full of life and innovation. But that was before." She paused, and for a brief moment, Jason saw the sadness in her eyes. "Before they turned on us. Before they changed." Jason's mind struggled to make sense of it. A whole civilization turned into something else? "What happened?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Liara turned to face him, her eyes searching his as if weighing something. "The signal," she said finally. "The one you followed. It's not just a distress call. It's a beacon, a trap. A way for them to find me." Jason felt a chill run down his spine. "You were the target." She nodded, her silver hair catching the dim light. "I didn't choose this, Jason. I didn't ask for it." Jason stood up, his boots making a soft thud against the metal floor. He moved toward her, his mind still racing. He didn't fully understand everything Liara had said, but one thing was clear: she wasn't just a victim. There was something deeper here, something he needed to uncover. "We're not alone in this," Jason said, his voice steady. Liara looked at him, her expression unreadable. "I told you, human. You don't know what you're dealing with." Jason's gaze hardened. "I'm not leaving you. Not now, not ever." She studied him for a long moment, her silver eyes searching his face as if trying to gauge his sincerity. Finally, she spoke. "You're a fool," she whispered, almost with a hint of a smile. "But thank you." Jason didn't respond. Instead, he turned toward the entrance, his senses sharpening. Whatever was coming, they would face it together. No matter the cost. The silence outside the outpost deepened, and Jason felt the weight of the moment press in on him. The next move was theirs. He wasn't sure what the future held, but one thing was certain: he wouldn't abandon Liara. They were tied to each other now, by fate, by the signal, and by something more. He wasn't about to let that connection be broken. As the first sign of movement appeared on the horizon, Jason took a deep breath, ready for whatever came next. They wouldn't run. They would stand their ground. Together. The wind outside had picked up again, its howling intensity rattling the windows of the old outpost. Jason stood at the doorway, his eyes scanning the horizon. Liara was still by the window, her posture tense, as if she could feel the danger approaching. They had no idea what kind of force was coming for them, but the eerie silence surrounding them felt like the calm before a storm. Jason's fingers gripped his weapon tighter. He had been in situations like this before, but nothing quite like this. He wasn't just fighting to survive. He was fighting to protect someone who had already lost so much. Liara's presence beside him reminded him that there was more at stake here than just his own life. Her alien grace, her quiet strength, it all pointed to the fact that she was not someone he could just leave behind. Whatever it was that was coming, they had to face it together. "They're here," Liara said quietly, her voice steady but filled with a warning. Jason looked at her. Her eyes were focused, but there was a sadness in them that he couldn't ignore. She knew what was coming. He didn't. Yet. He nodded, though he wasn't sure if he believed it or not. He could hear something faint in the distance now: engines. The sound grew louder, closer. It was unmistakable. They weren't alone anymore. Jason took a deep breath and moved toward the wall, checking his weapon one last time. The sound of footsteps echoed down the narrow hall of the outpost. They were coming. He could feel the tension building in the pit of his stomach. This was it. There was no more time for second guesses. They had to make a stand. Liara remained by the window, her gaze sharp, never wavering. Jason glanced at her, his eyes narrowing. "Are you sure about this?" he asked. Liara turned slowly, meeting his gaze. "I'm sure," she said. "I've been running from them for far too long. It ends now." Jason's chest tightened at her words. He couldn't imagine what it must be like to be hunted for so long, to feel like there was no way out. But now, she was no longer alone. They were in this together. Jason nodded once, then turned his attention back to the approaching threat. He wasn't about to let anything happen to her, not while he still had breath in his body. The rumble of the engines outside grew deafening, filling the small outpost with an ominous sound. Jason moved toward the door, his senses on high alert. The time for hiding was over. He knew they couldn't stay here forever. He had no idea what kind of force was out there, but he wasn't going to wait around to find out. "Stay close," Jason said, his voice steady but firm. Liara nodded, her silver eyes flashing with a determination he hadn't seen before. She wasn't afraid. She was ready. The door to the outpost opened slowly, and Jason's heart pounded in his chest as the outside world greeted them with its cold, barren silence. The engines were almost deafening now, and in the distance, Jason saw the outlines of ships, dark shapes in the horizon, moving closer. He didn't know what awaited them out there, but one thing was certain, whatever came next, he wasn't leaving Liara behind. Not now, not ever. The distant roar of engines grew louder, filling the air with a sense of impending danger. Jason stood at the threshold of the outpost, his body tense, every muscle prepared for whatever was about to come. Liara remained at his side, her silver eyes focused on the horizon, her expression unreadable. The ships were close now, their outlines visible against the dim sky. Jason could feel the weight of the moment pressing in on him. The calm was gone, replaced by the harsh reality of their situation. "They're here," Jason muttered, his voice steady but with a hint of urgency. Liara's gaze flicked toward him, her features hardening. "They never wait long." Jason nodded, his mind already working through their options. There was no time for second thoughts now. The outpost offered little in terms of defense, but it was the only cover they had. He had to make it work. "Get ready," he said, his tone leaving no room for doubt. Liara didn't reply, but Jason could see the determination in her eyes. She was ready. They both were. As the sound of the ships grew deafening, Jason glanced once more at the entrance. He could see their shapes now, massive, sleek, and foreboding. It wasn't just a few ships. There were dozens, each one looming in the sky, cutting through the air with an unsettling precision. Jason's heart rate quickened, but he remained calm. He had no intention of going down without a fight. "We need to move," Jason said, turning toward the interior of the outpost. "Follow me." Liara followed without hesitation, her movement swift and graceful despite the urgency of the moment. Jason led her through the darkened halls, his footsteps echoing in the silence. The sound of the engines above was deafening now, a constant reminder that their time was running out. They reached the center of the outpost, where a small control room stood. Jason immediately moved to the console, his fingers flying across the controls. He wasn't a tech expert, but he knew enough to operate basic systems. The console hummed to life, the screen flickering before settling on a map of the surrounding area. "We're not going to outrun them," Jason said, his voice grim. "But we can try to fight back." Liara stood beside him, her gaze fixed on the map. "It won't be enough," she said quietly. Jason looked at her, his brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" She met his gaze, her eyes sharp. "They're not here just for me. They're here for everything. They want to wipe us out completely." Jason's stomach churned at her words, but he didn't let it show. "Then we'll make them fight for it." He turned back to the console, his mind working quickly. There were weapons in the outpost, nothing heavy, but enough to hold their ground for a while. He wasn't going to let them just walk in and take everything without a fight. "Get to the armory," Jason ordered. Liara didn't argue. She turned and moved with purpose, her steps quick and precise. Jason followed closely behind, his thoughts racing. They needed to be ready. The ships were almost there. As they reached the armory, Jason's pulse quickened. The doors slid open with a hiss, revealing the small stash of weapons stored within. Jason quickly grabbed a rifle, checking its load and power levels before handing one to Liara. She took it without a word, her eyes still focused on the incoming threat. Jason could feel the tension in the air, the weight of what was coming. He wasn't sure if they could win this battle, but one thing was certain, he wouldn't back down. Not now. Not with Liara by his side. As the sound of the ships grew louder, Jason took a deep breath, his grip tightening on the rifle. They were ready. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The distant hum of the ships grew deafening as Jason and Liara made their way to the makeshift barricade inside the outpost. The walls were thin and aged, and the sound of their boots echoed against the metal floor as they prepared for the worst. Jason checked his weapon once more, the weight of it reassuring in his hands. He wasn't sure how much time they had left, but he knew they couldn't wait any longer. Liara moved silently beside him, her posture poised, every muscle tensed for what was to come. They reached the reinforced door of the main chamber, where Jason had rigged up a few simple defenses. It wasn't much, but it would have to do. He gave Liara a brief glance, the silent communication between them more than words could convey. "You ready?" he asked, his voice steady. Liara didn't speak but nodded, her eyes scanning the walls, her focus unwavering. They had no choice but to face whatever was coming. As Jason reached for the door controls, a sudden noise from outside made him freeze. The ships had landed. The engine's roar had stopped, replaced by the soft thrum of activity beyond the crater. Jason's mind raced as he held his breath, trying to make out any sounds. It was eerily quiet. Then, a thump. A heavy footstep. And then another. Jason's heart skipped a beat. They were here. They were so close. Without a word, Jason gestured for Liara to take position, and they both crouched down behind the barricade. Jason's hand was firm on the rifle as he peered through a small gap in the door. Liara was already at his side, her weapon in hand, her eyes never leaving the entrance. The silence stretched on, each second feeling like an eternity. Jason's thoughts churned. Who were they? What did they want with Liara? And why had they been hunting her for so long? He could feel the weight of her presence beside him, strong, yet vulnerable. A fleeting sense of protectiveness washed over him, stronger than before. Whatever came next, he wouldn't let anything happen to her. Then, the first figure appeared in the doorway, a shadow moving with purpose. Jason held his breath, watching as it stepped into the light. The figure was tall, armored in sleek black, with glowing red eyes that seemed to pierce through the darkness. Behind it, more figures followed, their movements synchronized, as if they were one unit. Jason felt his pulse quicken, his grip tightening on his weapon. He had no idea how many of them there were, but it didn't matter. He was going to fight for his life, and for Liara. The first figure took a step forward, its voice harsh and distorted by the helmet. "We know you're here," it said, the sound echoing through the still air. Jason's heart pounded as the figure took another step, its presence dominating the space. "You can't hide forever." Jason didn't flinch. "I'm not hiding," he muttered under his breath. Liara's hand rested lightly on his arm, and for a moment, Jason felt her quiet strength, as if she was telling him that they weren't alone in this fight. "Let's make it count," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Jason nodded, determination setting in his chest. They were ready. He wasn't sure how this would end, but there was no turning back now. The door between them and the unknown was all that separated them from the storm that was about to hit. Jason took a deep breath and stepped out from behind the barricade. The figures in the doorway stiffened, their attention snapping toward him. This was it. The fight was coming, and Jason would face it head-on, no matter the odds. Together. Jason stepped into the open, his weapon held steady as the figures in the doorway adjusted to his presence. The one at the front, the leader, stepped forward slightly, its red eyes glowing through the dark. Jason's pulse quickened, but he didn't move. This was it. No more hiding. He could feel Lyara's eyes on him, but he didn't need to look back at her to know she was ready. They were in this together. The leader's voice echoed again, distorted but clear. You think you can fight us? Jason's grip tightened on his rifle. He didn't reply, but his stance alone spoke volumes. He wasn't backing down. The leader glanced behind it, signaling to the others. They moved in sync, spreading out, surrounding the small entrance of the outpost. Jason's heart raced. The tactical advantage was gone. They were outnumbered, but he knew one thing for sure: he wasn't going down without a fight. Lyara stepped forward beside him, her eyes locked on the approaching figures, her expression calm but filled with determination. Jason could sense the strength in her, even if she didn't speak. She wasn't just standing beside him, she was standing for herself. We don't want to fight, the leader said, its voice almost mechanical, but there was a sharpness to it. But you will have no choice. Jason didn't flinch. He took a step forward, his feet heavy against the cracked floor. Then let's get it over with. The leader's glowing eyes narrowed, and it nodded to its comrades. Jason could feel the tension in the air, thick and almost suffocating. He didn't know what these beings were, what they had become, but he knew one thing: they were here for Lyara, and he wasn't going to let them have her. The figures in the doorway advanced slowly, but Jason wasn't waiting for them to make their move. He raised his weapon, aiming at the leader. He was ready. But then, Lyara's voice cut through the heavy silence, calm yet firm. Enough. Jason froze, his rifle still raised but not yet firing. He turned to look at her. Lyara was standing tall, her posture unyielding. You're wasting your time, she said, her voice carrying an authority he hadn't expected. They won't listen to you, Jason replied quietly. But I'm not trying to make them listen, she said, her eyes never leaving the leader. I'm making them understand. Jason's gaze flicked between her and the figures in the doorway. There was a moment of stillness before the leader spoke again, its voice quieter this time, almost reluctant. You've changed, Lyara. The words hung in the air, and for a moment, Jason saw the shift in the atmosphere. The tension was still thick, but now, there was a crack in it. The leader's words seemed to reach Lyara in a way he didn't understand. She stood unmoving, her expression unreadable. I'm not who I was, she said softly. Jason's heart raced as the weight of her words settled in. Was she really not the same person they had been hunting all this time? What had changed in her? Before he could process it, the leader's voice rang out again, stronger this time. Then you will die like the rest of us. The leader's comrades shifted, their movements quickening. Jason stepped forward, his weapon ready. You'll have to get through me first, he said, his voice low and fierce. The leader looked at him, its expression unreadable beneath the helmet. For a moment, time seemed to stretch, the tension hanging in the air, thick and heavy. And then, without warning, Lyara moved. Her hand shot out, not toward Jason, but toward the leader. There was a faint pulse of light, barely perceptible at first, but it expanded rapidly, surrounding her hand. The figures in the doorway stopped, their movement slowing, as if they were caught in a trance. The leader recoiled slightly, its posture rigid. You don't understand, it said, almost pleadingly. But Lyara's voice was calm and firm. No, you don't understand. I've been running for too long. It's time to end this. Jason watched, his heart pounding, as Lyara stepped forward, her presence commanding. The figures around them remained frozen in place, their glowing eyes dull, like they were unable to move. For the first time since this ordeal began, Jason felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, this wasn't a fight they had to win with weapons. Maybe, it was something else. And as the air around them shimmered with power, Jason stood back, watching as Lyara took control of the situation, her strength evident in every movement. It wasn't the end yet, but it was a start. A new chapter in their fight. A fight they weren't going to lose. The air in the outpost crackled with energy, the faint shimmer of Lyara's power still hanging in the space between them and the enemy. Jason stood a few steps back, his hand still gripping his weapon, but for the first time in this entire ordeal, he felt a sense of awe. He had seen Lyara fight before, he had witnessed her strength, but this was different. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was taking control. The figures in front of them remained frozen, their bodies stiff, their glowing eyes dimmed. The leader, once imposing, now looked almost small, its stance rigid and uncertain. Lyara's eyes were locked on it, her expression calm, almost serene. "You've lost," she said softly, the words hanging in the air like a heavy weight. The leader's head twitched slightly, its voice coming out in a rasp. "You think this is over?" Lyara's gaze hardened, her presence now radiating with an undeniable power. "It is over. For you." Jason could feel the tension in the air shift. The threat that had loomed over them was now just an empty shell, incapable of moving, incapable of fighting back. The air was thick with the energy Lyara had released, a silent force that had brought them all to this moment. Jason wasn't sure how she had done it. He didn't understand the power she wielded. All he knew was that she had done what he thought was impossible. She had turned the tables. The leader's voice came again, softer now, almost resigned. "You are not the same. You've changed, Lyara." She stepped closer, her silver eyes glowing with an intensity that matched the energy swirling around her. "I've had to change. For too long, I ran. For too long, I hid." Jason watched as Lyara's power continued to pulse around them, and for the first time, he realized how much of her story he still didn't know. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked quietly. Lyara didn't look at him, her gaze still fixed on the leader. "I didn't want you to see me like this," she said, her voice tinged with something that was almost regret. "I didn't want you to see what I've become." Jason took a step closer, his heart heavy with the realization. "You didn't have to do this alone." Lyara turned to face him then, her eyes meeting his with an intensity that seemed to pierce right through him. "I didn't choose this, Jason. But I chose to stand here. I chose to fight." The leader's form wavered, the light in its eyes flickering as if the life had drained from it. It remained standing, but its presence no longer felt threatening. Jason looked between Lyara and the leader, the weight of their situation slowly sinking in. "What now?" he asked, his voice low. Lyara glanced at him, her expression unreadable for a moment. "Now, we make sure they never threaten us again." The power she had summoned slowly dissipated, leaving behind an eerie calm. The enemy, once a formidable force, was now reduced to nothing more than a broken threat. Jason exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of everything that had happened pressing on his chest. They had won. But this was only the beginning. The world outside, the battles they had yet to face, still loomed large. They had come this far, together, and now there was no turning back. Lyara was right. It wasn't over. Not yet. The silence that followed was thick, heavy, but it was a welcome relief after the tension that had gripped them for so long. Jason stood still, his heart still pounding from the recent confrontation, but now, there was a strange sense of calm in the air. Lyara, her silver eyes glowing faintly, seemed to take a deep breath as if releasing the power she had summoned. The atmosphere around them slowly returned to its natural stillness, but Jason knew that this moment was fleeting. The battle they had just faced wasn't the end, it was only the beginning. Lyara turned to him, her expression softening for the first time in what felt like forever. "We did it," she said quietly, as if trying to convince herself as much as him. Jason nodded, his gaze never leaving her. "For now," he said. "But there's still a long road ahead of us." Lyara met his eyes, her features hardening with resolve. "I know. But we've taken the first step. That's what matters." Jason felt a flicker of pride at her words. She had faced her past, confronted her fears, and now, with him by her side, she was ready to face whatever came next. The outpost was still standing, but it wouldn't stay that way for long. They couldn't stay here. Not with the enemy still out there, waiting for their next move. We need to go, Jason said, his voice low. The ships are still out there. We have to find a safer place. Liara glanced toward the entrance, her gaze sharp. Where do we go? Jason thought for a moment, his mind racing through the options. There's a settlement, not far from here. It's a long shot, but it's the best we've got. Liara nodded without hesitation, her determination unwavering. Then let's go. Together, they moved toward the door, Jason keeping a careful watch as Liara moved with a quiet grace beside him. He couldn't help but feel a sense of awe at her strength. She had been through so much, and yet she was still standing, still fighting. They stepped outside into the cold air of Nephris, the winds howling once again as if welcoming them into the unknown. Jason took a deep breath, scanning the horizon for any signs of movement. The ships were still there, hovering in the distance, but there was no immediate danger. For now, they were safe. But Jason knew better than to let his guard down. The enemy was still out there. And they were coming for Liara. They had no time to waste. Let's move, Jason said, his voice steady. Stay close, and keep your eyes open. Liara didn't need to be told twice. She was already moving, her steps light and confident as they headed toward the settlement in the distance. Jason kept pace beside her, his hand never leaving the weapon at his side. The road ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear, they would face it together. Whatever it took, they would survive. They would fight. And they would win. As they moved further from the outpost, the wind began to die down, and the distant rumble of the enemy's ships seemed to fade into the background. But Jason knew that this was only the calm before the storm. He couldn't shake the feeling that the real battle was just beginning. But for now, he focused on the task at hand, getting them to safety. And as they continued their journey, side by side, Jason couldn't help but feel a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, they had a chance. Together.